Good morning. My name is Jonathan Sarna. I'm director of the Schusterman Center for Israel Studies, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's seminar, which is special in many respects. This is the first time in roughly 16 months that we have had an in-person group here at the Schusterman Center, in addition to sending the seminar out to the wide world. And we are also using brand new software in order to do that. And it is my hope that this will be the first of many, many programs that will be multi-access, available both internally here at Brandeis University and also to all of you. All of our programs, as you know, are also found later on our YouTube channel. Today's seminar is entitled, "Is Israel at the Transgender Tipping Point? From Big Screen Sensations to Small Screen Intimacies?" And our speaker is Dr. Slava Greenberg. Slava Greenberg is a graduate of Tel Aviv University, currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts, as well as at its Casden Institute. His research explores the potential of mainstream and emerging media forms to offer transformative experiences in reference to disability studies, trans studies, and gender. Slava's forthcoming book is entitled "Animation and Disability, Cripping Spectatorship," forthcoming from Indiana University Press. Slava's also co-edited Fireflies, the Journal of Film and Television, and has published articles in a wide variety of journals and anthologies. And not resting on his laurels, Slava is now hard at work on a second book project focusing on the history and visual culture of gender dysphoria through the lens of trans and crip theories. If you have questions during Slava's presentation, please send them through the chat. And our graduate student here with us today, Shira Malka Cohen, is monitoring the chat and will be hosting a question and answer period following Slava Greenberg's presentation. Without further ado, welcome Slava Greenberg to the Schusterman Center.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for having me here. I want to problematize the tipping point as a term. And so a lot of the things that I'll talk about today are sort of examples of the problems with issues of visibility and what it entails. So the television commercial that you can see here on the screen, and I'll play it in a second, featuring newly trans woman soccer referee Sapir Berman and pop star Noah Kiril, was rated by Israeli viewers as the most loved of the week that it appeared, which was only 2 months ago. It was released in July. So I'll play that. Second.
בהתחלה ממש חששתי ככה להטות, שאם עצמי כמו שאני כבר לא אוכל להיות. התפשרתי רוב הזמן, לא היה לי כיף לחיות, רציתי עוד, לכן בחרתי לשנות. אז לא ויתרת על האמת, עשית את השינוי שלך, עכשיו את כל כך נהנית עם הפן פה בחיים, אז תפחדו משינויים, גם אם מדובר בטלוויזיה כבר לא מתפשרים. יש פלוס אחד, איזה מגוון, אני שלמה עם התכנים, אני הרגשת בענן, ויש פלוס בינג'ים מושלמים, ויש פלוס קאצ'אפ זה מדהים, ויש פלוס יופי של סרטים שלא ראית בחיים. יש פלוס כולם, יש גם בלמה, חושתי זה הדבר, וגם דעות את היופי של ירוק, שליים יש מנפל הזה ממש נפלא.
לא שלמים עם הטלוויזיה שלכם? אל תתפשרו. הצטרפו עכשיו ל-yes ותיהנו מ3 ממירי אנדרואיד TV ללא תשלום נוסף. yes.
There's a lot to say about this ad in so many respects, and I'm also not even going to translate it for you. So trust me, the ad is for a satellite television company, yes, and was primarily based on the internationally acclaimed and Oscar-winning Australian film, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, from 1994. Behrman and Carol, alongside local drag queens, ride in the desert on a bus replica from the film, while Behrman lip-syncs Carol singing about needing a change. And if you read some of the articles written recently about this, so some say that maybe it's Carol lip-syncing Sapir Behrman's song, so who is dubbing who is also another question. The ad finishes off with the drag queen kicking the soccer ball in high heels, referencing Israeli gay and gender variant online culture, and particularly the famous music video invitation to an Arisa gay Mizrahi party line, special soccer party, also from 2011. I'll play that for you just for the visuals and the queer soccer culture. So the Yes ad that I opened with produced 27 years after the film and 10 years after this online ad for the party and this viral music video. It was aired after two pretty extensive months of interviews with Behrman all over the Israeli news, as well as mostly positive updates of her transition in all media platforms. And it was still discussed by Israeli print and online news outlets. as a novelty or the tipping point of trans visibility in Israel. So this is where I'm coming from. These past couple of months in the talk about the Israeli tipping point. So I'm starting out with locating the origins of that tipping point and maybe arguing that there isn't one, or at least it's not now. So what is the tipping point, or where does it come from? This is the actual origin. In 2014, actress and trans rights activist Laverne Cox was featured on the cover of Times Magazine in the article along the question, is America at the trans tipping point in 2014. 4 years later, in 2018 in Israel, followed with its own surge of trans visibility in print magazines, television, and online. So this is our cover. And this was marked by local trans feminine star Belle Agam's cover photo on Yediot Achronot's weekend edition of 7 Nights on March 9, 2018. In Israel, the trans tipping point was inspired by the popularity of reality television and its prominent position in Israeli programming. Trans folks have made occasional appearances on Israeli television since the trans pop singer Dana International Sharon Cohen won the Eurovision Song Contest in 1998 with her unforgettable delivery of Diva. Throughout this time, most of the visibility accorded to trans people in audiovisual media took place in nonfiction and especially reality television, beginning with Agam's participation in Project Y it was a brief performance in 2004. And so by 2017, when Mikey Elroy, the guy at the bottom right in the slide, participated in the Israeli version of the reality show Big Brother, he was already the third trans person to have participated in the show after Stav Streshko on the top right in 2015, and Talin Abu Hana in 2016, who also went on to winning the Miss Trans contest, the beauty pageant. And I want to pause for a second and think through this surge of visibility, or what does visibility mean? And I look to a Disclosure documentary on Netflix, very recommended, about trans visibility. And Sam Fader, the director of that film, he started working on it in 2016. He asked some pretty relevant questions. And he asked, to what point are we tipping? Visibility of whom to whom? Social justice for whom? Assimilation of whom? A shift in public discourse by whom and about whom? Does visibility actually mean serving as a profitable commodity? A few seemingly respectful roles pop up and people are overjoyed by that tiny crumb. What when you look at those roles, they beg questions. Are they actually respectful? Are they doing anything new or different? Or do they echo ongoing, archaic, and harmful themes and ideas of what it means to be trans? End quote. In the context of Israeli tipping point, trans visibility has been intertwined with, as I said, reality TV and its voyeuristic aesthetics. The same aesthetic was also found its way into the documentary genres, further obscuring their already fluid boundaries. So my talk today examines the tipping point of Israeli trans visibility through an analysis of 3 documentary series about trans experiences as utilized in film, television, and online. So these are sort of my case studies here. On the left, it's Girl Talk, and in the middle, it's Trans Kids, and then on the right is Spectrums. Both of the mini-series Girl Talk, produced by Ori Sali in 2017, and Trans Kids, produced by Gilad Medalia in 2019, are two of the most prominent examples of the specific Israeli meanings of trans visibility's double-edged sword. And both texts share many similarities. They were both produced in two formats, a series for television and a feature for festivals. Both have declared their novelty as the first or most comprehensive account of Israeli trans experiences. Both aired on major documentary channels in Israeli television, Hot and Yes. Both of them premiered at the Tel Aviv Cinematheque, and both were very well received by television critics. The web docu-series Spectrums, on the other hand, produced by Afek Destalauner and Zohar Maninik Ezra in 2017, received minimal media attention. Despite being actually the first trans for trans media project, the series was only featured on Facebook and was mostly shared within the trans community. The web series did not only afford new types of visibility, but also formed an online community around it, creating space for solidarity and accountability within it. And I'll go back to that in a minute. This could be explained by the higher production values and PR invested in the other series, the outcome of access to resources, as well as television's broader reach. However, I suggest that the web series' low reception is also a result of its social media, and particularly sort of Instagram aesthetics, rhythm, and less conventional editing. Girl Talk's popularity derives from its belonging to reality, to its blending of reality TV references to Big Brother, Come Dine With Me, and RuPaul's Drag Race. Garnished with the disclosure trope. The disclosure trope is when trans people are represented as hiding something, or transness as something that needs a particular disclosure. Hospital reality drama Trans Kids and other, on the other hand, uses its style to humanize trans teens through assimilation into the national ethos of healthy reproduction. And finally, I use Spectrums not just as an example of trans for trans online communities, but also as means of negotiating the limitations of televised documentaries about us, without us. So I want to begin this section with the opening sequence of Girl Talk to show you what I consider to be a gay cis male gaze on trans women.
שלום לך.
שלום לכולם.
אפרת, שנים שלא ראינו אותך.
כן, שלום, מה שלומך?
מה העניינים?
בסדר, מה נשמע?
נראית מושלם.
כן?
באמת, כאילו כמה זמן לא ראיתי אותך? מלא זמן.
את רוצה תאילנד עשה טוב.
טוב, הטיסה הבאה שלכם שאתן נוסעות את תאילנד.
כן, איתך, אבל גם את צריכה לעבור.
אני אוהבת את המורה הטבעי, מה שהטבע.
אבל זה חשוב, אני לא נראית... אני לא נראית טבעית.
את נראית טבעית, את נראית מצויה.
בסדר, אז מה לא...
אז רגע, אז אני בטבעי שהיא לא נראית טבעית ויפה?
את תראי עוד יותר יפה, תראי יותר העננה. עשיתי את כל הפנים.
לא לספר סודות.
לא, למה? לא
למה מה סודות?
אנחנו טבעיות יפות.
ברור, ברור.
עשיתי מפה עד לפה.
מתיחה? רק
מתיחה, לא. מתיחת צוואר.
גם בצוואר?
כן.
האמת שהוא מהמם נראה.
עשיתי קו לסת, מתיחה בפנים, מתיחת מצח, והכניסו לי, בגלל שפתחו את הראש, הוא הכניס לי 2 שתלים לעשות לחיים.
אז לי יש את הלחיים הטבעיות שלי.
בסדר. לי לא היה.
Girl Talk's attempt at humanizing trans women relies on a combination of 3 components: reality TV aesthetics, cis gay men's perception of trans women as part of gay history and culture, and pop and drag culture. I base this argument on the clip we just watched. This sequence establishes both the creative self-identification of the series and the production's own description of it. The camp opening signifies its proximity to reality competition genres a hybrid of Big Brother, popular among Israeli viewers, and RuPaul's Drag Race, popular among pop cult representations of gay men. Through this over-aestheticization and vision-centric representations of trans women's experiences, Girl Talk relies on the disclosure trope, which plays on the suspension of the gender reveal, consequently affirming binary perceptions of gender. Girl Talk premiered on Hot's documentary Channel 8 in 3 episodes. The series was set up as a pre-planned televised event, playing on suspending spectators' curiosity about the character's gender identity. The disclosure trope heavily features in the text as means of luring in the audience. While the physical borders of the crossing of the invisible green line are brushed off and obscured, the series is obsessed with gender crossing and reveals, constructed around trans women. The series opens with a dinner relying entirely on a guessing game. The text plays with its spectators, who is trans and who is cis, a game which ends with disclosure. This particular conversation and its central positioning within the series marks its aesthetic, narrative, and political stance. Set in Arizona's, it's one of the characters that we just saw, set in Arizona's eclectic, dense, and colorful mansion. Moore refers to it as Chateau Arizona. Spectators are intentionally thrown into a Pedro Almodovar-esque camp environment. In particular, one cannot help but be reminded of La Grada's famous monologue in All About My Mother.
Por causas ajenas a su voluntad, dos de las actrices que diariamente trabajan sobre el escenario hoy no pueden estar aquí. Pobrecilla. Así que se suspende la función. A los que quieran se les devolverá el dinero de la entrada, pero a los que no tengan nada mejor que hacer, y para una vez que venía al teatro, es una pena que os vayáis. Si os quedáis, yo prometo entreteneros contando la historia de mi vida. Adiós, lo siento, ¿eh? Si les aburro, hagan como que roncan, así. Yo me cosco enseguida y para nada eres mi sensibilidad, ¿eh? De verdad. Me llaman la agrado, porque toda mi vida solo he pretendido hacerle la vida agradable a los demás. Además de agradable, soy muy auténtica. Miren qué cuerpo. Todo hecho a medida. Rasgado de ojos, 80.000. Nariz, 200. Tiras a la basura porque un año después me la pusieron así de otro palizón. Ya sé que me da mucha personalidad, pero si llego a saberlo, no me la toco. Continúo. Teta, 2, porque no soy ningún monstruo. 70 cada una, pero estas las tengo ya súper amortizadas. Silicona en... ¿Dónde? Labio, frente, pómulo, cadera y culo. El litro cuesta unas 100.000, así que echa las cuentas porque yo ya la he perdido. Limadura de mandíbula, 75.000. Depilación definitiva en láser, porque la mujer también viene del mono. Bueno, tanto o más que el hombre, 60.000 por sesión. Depende de lo barbudo que uno sea, lo normal es de 2 a 4 sesiones. Pero si eres folclórica, necesitas más, claro. Bueno, lo que les estaba diciendo, que cuesta mucho ser auténtica, señora. Y en estas cosas no hay que ser rácana, porque una es más auténtica cuanto más se parece a lo que ha soñado de sí misma.
So in both these scenes, Girl Talk and this All About My Mother clip, trans women perform their lived experiences for the expectancies gaze demanding trans people to disclose every single detail, and as she does with the prices as well. The gender reveal for which the audience has been manipulated to wait occurs at the end of the episode, with the gradual appearance of still images of each of the dinner's participants, their full names, and a one-line biographical description. So to intensify the suspense, the slide appeared from right to left with Chen Arizona's full name, location, and biography, hairstylist and beauty parlor owner, the first transgender woman to marry in Israel. This is followed by Efrat Tilma's name, age 70. She's the only one who has an age on her bio. Residence at the assisted living facility in Bat Yam. And the statement recently debuted a play in Habima, the National Theater, based on the story of her life. And finally, Mor Sofayev's still photo appears with her location in Tel Aviv and description, owner of the More Pleasure Beauty and Care establishment. This slide alone explains the aesthetics, thematic, and political choices of featuring this dinner in the opening sequence, as More Pleasure is positioned as the butt of the joke. This cis woman with a drag queen's name for her business is intended to embody the spectator's presumed cis-sexist perceptions, thus using her to simultaneously confuse and titillate the audience. The documentary mini-series Trans Kids aired on YES in 2018, 1 year after the Israeli trans tipping point and 2 years after Girl Talk and Spectrums. Though it definitely wasn't the first, this series has afforded the most extensive screen time to date in Israeli television. 5 50-minute-long episodes filmed over the course of 4 years, dedicated to trans experience. The series and the film featured 4 trans teens. You can see here, Romy Abergil, 15 at the time of the shooting, Free Shemesh, 15, Liron Metzes, 17, and Norm Kaniel, 16. Trans Kids' novelty is that of the accepting parental gaze. This relies on genuine love and care mixed with anxiety and ignorance, and resulting in gatekeeping, sexism, and nationalism. It is worth mentioning that Medalia, the director, treats her 4 protagonists with care and respect. However, the series' focal point is centered on the parents, thus revealing Medalia's own identification. This focus on the parental point of view, particularly as it conflicts with what the trans child, with that of the trans child, allows Medalia to shift between advocating for access to gender-affirming care and promoting medical and national policing and dictation of the transition's pace and desired route. In a recent interview conducted in Hebrew that I got to hear thanks to Ilana, with Israeli documentarist Rami Katz, who conducted the interview, Medalia positions trans kids and by proxy herself as an advocate for trans children and youth. Throughout the interview, Medalia uses the English word visibility rather than its common and available Hebrew counterpart. This renders transness as foreign, as the struggle for visibility is borrowed from the US. Medalia concludes her arguments in an authoritative tone. Like I always say, no one chooses to be transgender. To further hone this argument, Medalia explains how trans people can be found anywhere. This includes remote places like the southern port city of Ashdod, Romi's hometown, and even religious settlements like Oranit, where Noam lives. Through no fault of their own, Noam and his family become the living evidence of Medalia's conviction that no one would choose this. Great attention is dedicated to the process that Noam's father undergoes, from declaring that transness that if transness was genetically detectable, he would have wanted to abort the pregnancy, to attending a pride parade with his trans son. For Medalia, the father's transformation serves as proof that no one would choose this. I will play the clip, and it was also...
אבל שלא יהיה ספק שהסיטואציה היא לא נורמלית.
it was also in the trailer for that. So she really liked this specific scene, and for obvious reasons.
אתה רוצה לתקן אותי?
אני רוצה
תשלח אותי לקבוצת בנות ביצירה.
אני לא רוצה לתקן אותך, אבל אם הייתי יכול, נועם, אם הייתי יכול למנוע את הדבר הזה, הייתי מונע אותו. אם היינו יודעים, בבדיקה הראשונה שדבר כזה יכול לקרות, אולי לא היית נולד.
אוי ואבוי, באמת.
טוב, אני הולך לעמוד בפינה ולבכות על היום שנולדתי.
אתה לא הולך לעמוד?
אני לא מאמינה שאמרת את זה.
באמת? אם היית יודעת בבדיקה הראשונה, לא יודע, בדיקת דם ראשונה שיש לך בעיה עם העובר, היית ממשיכה את ההיריון?
In terms of the series' content, it displays a focus on national womb Zionist ideologies in the form of pressure to have children and mandatory military service and other aspects pretty normal to Israel. In terms of its generic affiliation, Trans Kids draws from television's medical drama to increase its emotional appeal. Its reliance on the medical gaze forms a narrative of medical transition, which blurs the boundaries between elective medical interventions, such as fertility preservation, and life-saving procedures, such as hormone replacement therapy, gender-affirming care. The series' alignment with the medical point of view is one of the most apparent ways in which it integrates the direct documentary fly on the wall style with the fictional medical drama. Specifically, it does so by aligning with the medical point of view through medical drama cinematography. That I'm not going to go too much into that, but the most apparent sentiment expressed by Medalia throughout the series and that interview is the maternal care. This serves as her main source of identification, as well as the lens through which she engages with the parents. Concurrently, the parents are not only represented as consenting guardians, but also serve as co-stars of the series. This sort of maternal or parental gaze through, though more holistic than the camp gay cis male gaze, tends to lead towards medical perspectives and gatekeeping, as well as nationally driven normalization of the teens. At the end of that Zoom interview, the question of the double-edged sword of visibility is finally tackled through a discussion of self-representation. Katz, the interviewer, opens the Q&A with a question from Shaked Salame, a trans man who posted it in the chat about the inclusion of trans writers in the production. The interviewer finds the question extremely amusing, foreign, and particularly American. He says, it's such an American question. I understand that now in America, if you want to tell a story about a transgender person, you have to be transgender. If you want to tell a story about someone who's Black, you have to be Black. End quote. Medalia adds to Katz's dismissal of the notion of self-representation, explaining that she heard these arguments while producing films in China, and that people told her that she's white and she has an external gaze, and with that, it ends. Medalia simply proclaims this without providing an explanation. Under the notion that this argument is self-explanatory, the mere mention of itself seems absurd to her. Before finally admitting that there were no trans folks involved with this production, Medalia praises one foreign trans filmmaker, Kimberly Reed, who is in New York. This hearkening to another creator leads the audience to read her confession as the unfortunate result of an unfruitful search for local trans talent. However, as evidenced by the series, Medalia did have access to professional advice and feedback on issues of representation, but it was medical, and so it makes it so much harder to regard this omission as accidental in any way. So both before and after the tipping point, trans visibility in Israel television has overwhelmingly been created about and never by, with, or for trans folks. Despite the fact that documentaries among the more affordable of cinematic productions, it remains to be inaccessible to trans filmmakers in Israel, both in film and television industries. One might only find exceptions by broadening the search from television to other lower cost and less mediated platforms online. Spectrums is the closest to Girl Talk and Trans Kids in its genre, style, and duration, that's being the only relatively fair comparison to the other two. The most apparent difference between the two television documentary series and this web series is their length and reach. They are also distinct from each other in their opposite editing styles. The former rely on the tension created by parallel editing, while the latter relies on problematizing linear approaches to trans experience. In addition, while the women in Girl Talk are set indoors and teens and trans kids move around healthcare clinics and hospitals, each of Spectrum's 10 diversely gendered characters is set in a particular urban outdoor environment. This is what it sort of looks like in each of the episodes. And it does convey very clear Instagram aesthetics and images that are familiar from those types of social media. Each of Spectrum's episodes focuses on a single person and is titled after the main character. Their duration varies from 12 to 17 minutes, telling each participant's story in their own time. Each participant looks directly into the camera and explains the personal and social aspects of their transition. While Girl Talks and Trans Kids' parallel editing creates spatial and temporal continuity in service of the disclosure trope, Spectrums breaks it up into pieces, destabilizing and disorienting spectatorship with frequent jump cuts. And I'll just show you a clip so you can feel what a jump cut means.
פקח, ואמר לי, רגע, אתה בן או בת? ואני בלי חולצה, ואני רק עם חלק תחתון לבוש, ואז אמרתי לו, אני טרנס. ואז הוא אומר לי, טוב, אני לא יודע מה החוק אומר לגבי זה, אבל תלבש חולצה. יש פה משפחות עם ילדים. כאילו, אתה לא יכול להסתובב פה בלי חולצה. החזה שלי הוא לא חזה של ביקיני. זה לא מסוג הדברים שהייתי רוצה לראות. התעמתתי איתו. כי זה לא אני מול הפקח. זה אני מול החברה. אתה בא עם הגוף שלך, ואתה מערער על החוקים שאני החברה קבעתי. בין אם זה אני החברה הגברית, ובין אם זה אני החברה הנשית. אם אתה טרנס, אז תוריד אותם. למה אתה נשאר עם החזה שלך? אמרתי לו, מה החוק אומר? הוא אפילו לא יודע מה החוק אומר לגבי טרנסים, אבל הוא יודע שזה לא נעים לו. אז נשארתי בלי חולצה. תבוא אליי עם החוק. לא בקטע מטריס, כן בקטע מטריס. בן אדם זה ציצים. אני טרנס, אני לא הגבר שהוא אתה. להיות גבר או להיות אישה מבחינתי, זו תמונה שהיא חד מימדית.
Okay, so I hope you were able to see sort of the cuts through even one sentence. Sometimes we see those cuts, which is very unusual for documentary, and it's pulling us out of the story. The series is opening montages, each focusing on a single person in different urban settings, aesthetically align the text with Instagram images, celebrating discontinuous present moments. Most participants pose as if they are shot by a still camera, while some are shown exhibiting their bodies in motion, particularly dancing. The accumulation of the dozens of shots all taken in the course of a day or two replaced traditional documentary sort of process-focused representation of trans bodies and lives. The trope of the before photo album is replaced by countless images of the present. Following the fashion-like celebration of the now, each episode quickly zooms into intimate close-ups, exploring the present through its past and futures. Each episode, the character looks straight into the camera and describes personal experiences with their gender identity. This use of the monologue subverts the conventional focus of the transition or gender reassignment confirmation narrative. The first episode of the series features Effect Tetzel Lautner, a trans man and the co-creator of the series. The episode not only utilizes a non-linear editing style, but also aligns it with Effect's own non-binary gender perception. And I'll play just the beginning.
היום אני קצת, אפילו הייתי אומר מתאבל על הנראות הנשית שהייתה לי. זה מצחיק להגיד את זה, כאילו, היום אני כאילו מתגעגע לנראות נשית. ואז בשביל מה עשית את כל התהליך הזה? אני עושה להתבכיין, אבל לא, זה חלק מהתהליך. בהתחלה, בגלל הכאב הגדול שנוצר מהדיסקונקט, מהחוסר חיבור בין עצמך לבין הגוף שלך, שבאיזשהו מקום הנשמה שלך לא מתיישבת הכי טוב בגוף שלך, אז אתה נורא עסוק בפיזיות. פעם ממש לא יכלתי לרקוד, הייתי כל כך ביישנית, חסומה, צורה. כשהייתי ילדה, כשהייתי צעירה, רקדתי מלא בילדות שלי, מלא, כל הזמן רוקדת, ממציאה ריקודים. אבל משהו קרה, כאילו באיזשהו שלב. לקחתי את הדחף ואת הרצון, וכאילו נעלתי אותה באיזה פינה, אז זה נחמד עכשיו להתחבר לזה מחדש, שאני יוצא ולרקוד ולהשתחרר.
Spectrums is co-directed by a trans filmmaker who also invites a conversation by literally exposing his body, thoughts, and emotions on screen. This is the first episode. In addition, however, the series offers another form of intimacy for the trans viewer, one rooted in the communal dynamics of sharing and watching content online. Melinik and Launer shot all first 5 episodes before debuting the first one on Facebook. They'd set up a page for the series with still sneak peeks of the characters along with the series' logo. The news quickly spread through all major local trans Facebook groups. Thus, the creators not only built tension towards the online premiere, but also stressed the trans aspect of it, positioning their text as made especially for us. The space allowed some trans folks to view the series before deciding to be filmed for it. Spectrums offered yet another unmediated form of engagement with the notion of trans visibility in Israel. The creators intended to offer a diverse and inclusive perspective on the Israeli trans community. However, the series also illustrated the ways in which visibility can be a form of white and Jewish privilege. Representation in the series includes a fairly wide spectrum of gender identification and performance, as well as ethnicity, class, and geographic location. Yet at the same time, it also excludes Black, disabled, and through no fault of their own, also Palestinian trans folks. On March 5th, 2017, the 4th episode of the series was released, centering Che, a Palestinian trans man with an Israeli citizenship. However, only 2 days later, the episode was taken down from the series' Facebook page and only broadcasting, and it was the only broadcasting platform. Instead of the episode, a statement was posted to the page, self-evidently written by the creator, and it reads as follows. Due to actual threats on the life of Che, who was exposed in the 4th episode of the series, we have been forced to remove the episode from the page. The trans community is constantly negotiating high-risk situations, whether in our places of residence, our workplaces, with family members, and against state institutions. Every person has the right to live with a basic sense of safety. The danger to our lives is real. We all struggle to exist in dignity and live beyond the survival existing fight. We will continue to act against societal transphobia and an advancement of this right. One of the fundamental principles of this project was to create empowerment, acceptance, and a greater sense of safety for our community. Our day-to-day realities as trans people can be disrupted at any moment, and in many cases leave us exposed to violence just for being who we are. In a courageous and extraordinary step, Che and the other participants have chosen to take part in this project to raise social awareness in Israel in order to create a different reality for the trans community. We stand with Che. Despite this beautiful sentiment of the announcement, at the end of the day, no Palestinian, Black, or disabled folks were included in the series, which purported to represent the Israeli trans community. I am, of course, fully aware that 10 episodes cannot include representation of all diverse group types in Israel. However, I find it most unfortunate that the only portrayal of Black and disabled, transgender, and non-conforming folks in Israel took place elsewhere through the astonished cis straight male gaze dominating Ronnie Kuban's extraordinary episode Queers in 2019. All parties involved in the production of these 3 documentary series shared the cause of promoting the trans community's visibility. However, and surprisingly, the trans-led production is the one most reminiscent of trans Instagram feed on the International Trans Day of Visibility on March 31st. Stills, clips, and snippets of trans folks posing for the camera, dressing up, modeling in front of old buildings, expanding their bodies into the streets and claiming space, meant for the pleasure of other trans and gender variant spectators. I conclude with words of encouragement from the artwork emerging from the access afforded by social media platforms. This is only the beginning of a conversation about the Israeli upsurge in trans visibility and an invitation to discover trans filmmaking. I've only discussed those who were able to produce visibility on cis terms, appearing on television, acting in films, participating in and directing documentaries, etc. However, the history of trans visibility in Israel remains incomplete without uncovering works by trans and gender varying filmmakers who, and I quote Laura Warwick, worked in film and television without their gender history becoming known, and those who made home movies that have been lost to history, end quote. And finally, I joined Spectrum's final dedication to those who choose to create anew, to those who still struggle to create, and to those who create, and to the new creations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg, for this very insightful talk. Hello, my name is Jerome Cohen, and I am a PhD student at Brandeis University and a fellow at the Fisher Student Center, and I will be now conducting the Q&A sessions. So we have had a couple of questions on the chat, the Zoom chat. And some of the first questions that we had was a sort of general question about language. So this person was asking about how Hebrew has been accommodating these new trans and non-binary people. Has there been any changes to the Hebrew language in order to include these new communities, especially considering how Hebrew is a very gendered language?
So thank you for an excellent question. Trans folks aren't new, as I was trying to say in the talk. We've been around. In terms of language, in the US, there is an attempt to create a gender neutral Hebrew language that was created. You can look it up online, it has all the syntax of it, but it's not popular in Israel at all. It's not, there is no singular they, and everything is obviously gendered. Non-binary folks in Israel find ways of mixing the language. It's not, they is not as common as it is, but it's mostly just mixing up the genders within a single sentence conversation.
Thank you. Another question that we had asks about the two documentaries produced by the TV and their focus, especially the second one, Transkid, was their focus on sort of the medical model, whether there was also a discussion about class, because obviously these medical procedures are very expensive, and so access to such things as hormone treatments and other kinds of procedures can be very expensive. So is there also a focus on class barriers in connection to trans identity?
There was an opportunity to do that in the series, but no, obviously it did not address any class issues. But it's worth mentioning that trans medical care in Israel and in the US is very different, and in terms of access, not for kids, but for adults, accessing hormone replacement therapy is in some ways easier than in the US. And there's and the way that the public healthcare system is set up is different. So in some aspects, it could be, I'm not talking about surgeries, just the hormones can be accessed relatively easier. And there are, I mean, you can look for class issues in the series. It's not addressed, but you can see it from at least the two characters who aren't from the center. Naomi and Boji, there's a lot of class issues within her narrative, but it's not addressed by this.
And we have a follow-up question in regards to the first question. Someone in the chat asked if you could give an example of how non-binary folks use Hebrew.
Well, it could be just if you are referring to a person. So first, it varies. You have to ask the same that you will ask for someone's pronouns. If it's someone non-binary, you will ask them how they would like to be addressed, and then it's for a lot of the non-binary Hebrew speakers I know, it will be a mix of both masculine and feminine gendered language within a particular sentence, but there could be other preferences. There are folks who prefer plural, although plural is also gendered in Hebrew, so it's not, but some would prefer that, so it depends on the consent. There isn't like an equivalent to a singular they.
Thank you. I would like to go back to the first commercial that you showed us at the beginning of your talk with Sabeel Bellman. As you mentioned, the response to this commercial in Israel was largely very positive, with sort of the sense that trans identities and trans people are now being more accepted into society. But there have also been some negative responses to the commercial in the sense that there's something exploitative almost about sort of big corporation using these trans woman and trans identity and things that are very central to trans and LGBTQ plus culture for their commercial purposes. So would you say some more things about this?
The exploitative aspect of a commercial, I think it's a given always for any commercial aspect has that embedded, I guess. But there was criticism of the commercial from other also direction. There were people within the trans community who didn't like the mixture between drag queens and trans women. That was the main sort of, and a lot also didn't like the reference to Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, because it's also, there is a trans character there, but it's mainly a film about drag queens, and it's there are folks in the community who like to distance themselves from drag performers, and especially that was the main, I would say, from within the trans community, that was the main criticism of the reliance on that film and the drag queens as part of that, and also there were other aspects that were criticized in the commercial.
Thank you. If I can sort of stay with that line, you were also talking, when you were talking about the first documentary series, Girl Talk, you were talking about this aspect of camp that also comes from shows like RuPaul's Drag Race. But is there a sort of tension between, in trans identity, between camp and authenticity? Because on the one hand, you have this need to sort of present your identity as it is, but as you're also mentioning, there's a lot of recourse to use camp features and images and things like that.
I think that the camp features are part of certain genres on TV, and that's where it comes from. In this particular, I mean, it wasn't invented by TV, but it was popularized by TV, and RuPaul, it made it into a genre, and then what the series did was sort of take some of the real life experiences and mold them into a camp mold from this perspective that they represented them through that lens.
And would there have been, so what was the sort of reaction from the trans community toward these way of representation? Was it more positive? As you said, like with the commercial, there are some negative reactions to the use of drag queen imagery, but how does the trans community interact with these sort of representations?
Well, it's a really good question because it's very complicated. Everything about visibility is complicated because when it comes to visibility, we applaud the fact that somebody cast a trans person and they are even seen. So that there'll be those who praise the mere visibility and sort of the crumbs that Sam Fader was talking about, and they'll feel appreciative of that. And especially in documentary series, another complicated aspect is that these are community members who are participating. And so obviously as a community, you want to support the participants and their contribution to the community by doing this, by stepping up and taking on this role of sort of speaking for the community and so on. So it's complicated because you want to support your community doing this work, but then looking at it through the narrative that was made up for them is problematic and uses them in problematic ways. So I guess it's complicated. It's just, it's both.
Thank you very much. I think we are at 1:15, so this is all the time we have for questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg, and thank you for all the participants who sent us questions. Thank you very much.